Guys, I'm pleased to welcome to the podcast a new guest. His name is Richard Hanania, and we're going to be talking about his new book. It's called The Origins of Woke. Now, Richard is a research fellow at the University of Texas. He's also president and founder of the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology. He's a graduate of University of Chicago Law School, got his PhD in political science from UCLA, and his website, Richard Hanania, HANANIA.com. Richard, welcome. Great to have you. I've been following you on social media, and I finally had a chance to read your book, which I really enjoyed. And it's called The Origins of Woke. Now, let's start with the term woke, because as you know, there are people on the left who act as if, I guess they treat woke kind of like Antifa. It's a myth. It doesn't really exist. And they're like, we challenge you to define the idea of wokeness. And you know, sure, probably there's some people who use the term loosely, but you have here on page 4, a very precise definition of woke. So let's tell us what woke means.
Yeah, so they do that. I mean, if they can, it's a gotcha question. If one person doesn't have a good answer, that'll go viral. I know, my background is in social science and law. So anyways, I like to define my terms. So I give you 3 just pillars of wokeness, right? Its disparities are caused by discrimination. If blacks or women don't do as well as whites and men on some measure, we don't care about other disparities. We don't care if women are doing better than men at something, but these problematic disparities. On top of that, you have speech restrictions in the interest of overcoming the disparities. The minority group, must feel welcome, or they must not be stereotyped, or whatever. That's all in the service of fighting inequality. And then finally, there's this sort of institutional aspect, which is there's a bureaucracy, private or public sector, that's necessary to enforce, number 1 and number 2.
Okay, that's a very clear definition, and I think a very important one for a couple of reasons. Well, one of them is quite simply that it identifies not simply the ideological, but also the bureaucratic or enforcement mechanism. That this isn't just some pie-in-the-sky idea that they're talking about or having a seminar about. They're carrying it through policy and through law. But let me highlight and ask you a question about the second part of that definition, which is the censorship aspect, because you seem to be suggesting that speech restrictions are essential to the idea of wokeness. It isn't just that they have reached a point where they want to go after disinformation. Censorship is built into woke ideology. How so?
Yeah, I mean, because, whenever you see sort of, complaints about this stuff, people will say, well, discrimination is the cause of disparities. And as soon as you have a different argument, and I think it's probably because the alternative arguments are so good. Look, men and women are different. Like, oh my goodness. Right? Like, you need, if you allow any free speech on this issue, then you're going to sort of expose this idea that disparities cause discrimination is absurd. So, I think it's that shows sort of the brittleness of the intellectual sort of foundation of this stuff, that discrimination explains all disparities in the world, because, I mean, these arguments on a level playing field, and we see this a little bit with Elon Musk buying Twitter and, the censorship not being so strong. We're seeing a lot of people, politically incorrect ideas on race, sex, on crime, get out there. So yeah, I don't think it's accidental. I think it's, essential to what they're doing.
It does, though, seem to me to be an escalation. And I say this because although concepts like hate speech go back to the 1990s, when I think back to the 80s and 90s, even the left would make a distinction between racism and discrimination. So racism is the ideology and discrimination is the practice. That at least was the mantra that we heard. And that would be an argument for allowing free speech, because the idea was that you can't police people's thoughts and ideas. Now, you can prevent their actions. So if somebody says a black guy and a white guy apply for a job, the black guy is better qualified, the white guy that's discrimination. That's action and conduct, and that can be restricted. But it's interesting to see how that has now metastasized into the idea that even the expression of the idea is now controversial, and not just racism. I mean, they treat merit like it is a disguised form of racism, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and this is not new. I mean, that's one of the ideas I stress in the book. Some of the things, like you say, the escalation in the speech restriction, that's new. I think that probably has something to do with the internet. I mean, people can look up their own facts now. They can't really build a narrative on these, like I remember the Trayvon Martin, the George Floyd thing. I mean, things come out now that it can't just be the three networks and the major newspapers telling you what to think. Yeah, but a theme in the book, like I said, is the idea that like merit is discriminatory. I mean, that comes from a court case from 1971. That wasn't something that was invented in the summer of Floyd. That's not something that came in, the second Obama administration. That's something that the law has basically been doing and assuming for a very long time. And, we almost, I think, sometimes I think we have to give credit for the wokes to like at least being more honest than the sort of 1980s, 1990s version of civil rights, which was to pay lip service to, the 1964 ideals, but then at the same time, have this sort of what today would be called Ibram Kendi equity sort of ideology. So I think that's like, sort of helped in pushing back against it.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, we're going to dive more into this stuff. Richard Hanania, the book is The Origins of Woke. The website, richardhanania.com. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago, and what a difference we've seen in our joints. Nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. Now, how does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. More than 1 million people have tried Relief Factor. Guess what? 70% or more have gone on to order more. It works for them. Debbie's a true believer. It works for her. She can now do exercises, push-ups, planks that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor's been a big game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, Mike here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again, 800-4RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference.